Some people did something. That was the phrase she used to describe September 11th, the morning when nearly 3,000 Americans left for work and never came home again. Some people did something. The woman who spoke those words is a member of the United States Congress. On a Tuesday afternoon, a 74-year-old senator from Louisiana sat across from her, holding one single sheet of paper and two words she had never once spoken. I have sat through countless hearings in that building. Most of them amount to nothing. People read prepared statements, ask questions whose answers they already know, and everyone eventually goes home. But the moment John Kennedy drew a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket that afternoon, I knew this hearing would be different. Omar arrived prepared for battle. She always arrives prepared for battle. Before Kennedy had even adjusted his microphone, before the ranking member had finished her opening remarks, before anyone in the room had spoken a single word about the purpose of the session, Omar leaned into her microphone and began. Senator, I know exactly what this is. Another Republican show trial designed to target the only black Muslim woman in Congress. I have been threatened. I have been harassed. I was sprayed with chemicals at my own town hall by a man who was never charged. And now you bring me here to weaponize my own words against me. She looked straight at Kennedy. I care about my community. I care about the people I represent. And I will not be silenced by this hearing or any other. You have heard this sequence before. The script that runs before every answer. The shield that rises before the first question is asked. Every time, in every room, the same progression. I am a target. I am a woman. I am Muslim. I am black. Therefore, your question is not a question. It is an attack. Watch what Kennedy does with it. He waited until she finished. He did not interrupt. He did not sigh. He did not perform that familiar senatorial shuffle of papers meant to signal that he is unimpressed. He simply waited. And when she was done, he spoke the way a man speaks when he has carried a thought for a long time and has finally found the right Sunday afternoon to set it free. Well, ma'am, I appreciate you coming, and I want to be clear about something right at the start. This is not a show trial. I don't do shows where I come from in Louisiana. You want a show, you go to the state fair and watch somebody try to guess your weight. A small sound moved through the room, not quite a laugh. I'm just going to ask you about some things you said. Your words, in public, on camera. And I'd like to understand what you meant by them. That's all this is. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and drew out a single piece of paper folded once. Not a folder. Not a binder. Not a stack of documents. One piece of paper. I have 5 of your quotes written down here. Quotes. I wrote them out myself last Sunday because I wanted to make sure I got them right. And I'd like to go through them with you if that's all right. He plays this role, the country lawyer who is simply trying to understand the man from the bayou who does not quite follow all this big city politics. It is the most dangerous act in the United States Senate because behind that accent sits a man who graduated at the top of his class at Vanderbilt, earned his law degree from the University of Virginia, and studied at Oxford. He is not confused. He is not slow. He is patient. And patience with Ilhan Omar is a weapon no one else has ever tried. He unfolded the paper. Number 1. In 2019, at a fundraiser for the Council on American Islamic Relations, you said the following about the September 11th attacks. He read it slowly, the way you read something when you want every word to land on its own. Some people did something. He looked up. 3,000 Americans died that morning, ma'am. I'd like to understand what you meant by some people. Omar straightened in her chair. She had answered this question before. She had a prepared response. She believed she was ready. She was not ready because Kennedy was not asking the question she thought he was asking. He was not asking about September 11th. He was asking about words, how she uses them, who receives which ones. And by the time she understood that, the paper would be almost finished. Omar had her answer ready. She had been delivering this answer for 5 years. Senator, that speech was about Muslim Americans being treated as second-class citizens after September 11th. I was defending my community against discrimination. The full quote makes that clear. Republicans have taken 3 words from a 40-minute speech and used them as a weapon for 5 years. She had answered this question 100 times, practiced it, polished it. And if Kennedy had walked in with a gotcha clip from Fox News, she would have swatted it away in 60 seconds. That is what she does. That is what she has always done. But Kennedy did not come with clips. He came with a question. I hear you, ma'am. Context matters. I agree with you on that. So let's look at more of your words, because if that quote was taken out of context, then your other words should show me a pattern of someone who respects the people who died that morning. Let's see if they do. He looked down at the paper. Number 2, February 2019. You posted on Twitter about American support for Israel. You wrote, "It's all about the Benjamins, baby." When somebody asked you who was paying American politicians, you said AIPAC. He set the paper on the table. Your own party leadership called that an anti-Semitic trope, ma'am. The full House of Representatives passed a resolution condemning it, and you apologized on camera to the country. He paused, curious, or at least performing curiosity so well that the difference did not matter. Did you mean that apology? I did. I learned from that moment. I grew. I have always stood against anti-Semitism in every form. She said she grew. Remember that word, because what she did 17 months later will tell you whether it was true. Kennedy nodded slowly, the way your grandfather nods when he is deciding whether to believe you. Growth is a good thing, ma'am. I'm glad to hear it. So let me ask you about what happened after you grew. He did not pause between the apology and what came next. He did not need to. The trail was already pulling. September 2021. The House voted on funding for the Iron Dome. For folks at home who don't follow this closely, that's a defense system. It doesn't attack anybody. It doesn't invade anybody. It sits in a field and it waits. And when a rocket is fired at a school or an apartment building full of families eating dinner, it shoots that rocket out of the sky before it hits the children. He let that sit. The vote was 420-9. 420 members of the United States Congress looked at a system that protects children from rockets and said yes. 9 said no. You were one of the 9. Omar leaned forward. The Iron Dome vote was a policy position, Senator. I have consistently questioned blank check military aid without conditions or accountability. That is my right as a member of Congress, and I will not apologize for exercising it. It is your right. I'm not arguing with that. Not even a little. Kennedy picked up the paper again. But ma'am, here's what I can't get past, and I've been thinking about this since last Sunday and I still can't make it work in my head. You apologized for saying support for Israel was about money. You said you grew. You told the American people you were a different person. That was in March 2019. And then 17 months later, 17 months after the apology and the growth and the new understanding, you voted against a system that catches rockets before they hit kindergartens. Not offense. Defense. A machine that exists for one reason: to stop children from being killed. When you apologized, ma'am, did you mean it, or did you mean it until the cameras turned off? Here is what Kennedy was building. You could not see it yet, but I could. He was not asking about Israel. He was not asking about AIPAC. He was building a map of how Ilhan Omar uses words that sound right in public and mean something different in practice. An apology that is not an apology. Context that is not context. Growth that is not growth. And he was about to show what happens when the map grows large enough to reveal the whole picture. Kennedy looked at the paper one more time. Number 3. And this is the last one I'm going to number, ma'am, because after this one, I think you'll see where we're going. February 24th, 2026. The State of the Union Address. The President of the United States was speaking to Congress and the American people. Every camera in the country was rolling. He read slowly. You shouted, "You are a murderer." You shouted, "You are a liar." You shouted, "You have killed Americans." Kennedy set the paper down. Ma'am, 2 Americans died during an ICE operation in your district. That is a tragedy. I mean that. Then his voice changed. Not louder, lower. But I want to go back to something. 3,000 Americans died on September 11th, 2001, and you called it "some people did something." 2 Americans died during a law enforcement operation in Minneapolis, and you called the President of the United States a murderer on the floor of Congress on national television. He folded the paper once. 3,000, some people. 2, murderer. Help me understand your system, ma'am, because from where I'm sitting, the words you pick don't depend on how many people died. They depend on who you're angry at. You remember where you were on September 11th. Every person watching this right now remembers the towers, the smoke, the phone calls that went to voicemail and never got returned. You remember all of it. Some people did something. And then 4 months ago, the same woman stood on the floor of the United States Congress and screamed murderer at the president. Not about 3,000, about 2. You have been saying this for years at your kitchen table. To your kids who told you to calm down. To your spouse who said maybe you were overreacting, that the words don't match, that the outrage is selective, that the anger has a formula, and the formula has nothing to do with how many people are gone, and everything to do with who's on which team. You were not overreacting. You were right. If you felt that just now, if the math hit you the way it hit me the first time I added it up, 3,000 and she said some people, 2 and she said murderer. If that math has been sitting in your chest for years and nobody with a microphone has ever said it out loud, this channel is where they say it out loud. Subscribe because Kennedy is not done. Omar knew, you could see it in the shift. She had walked in expecting a list of grievances she could swat away one at a time. What she got was a mirror, and the reflection was beginning to look like something she had never intended anyone to see. So she did what she always does when the ground shifts. She attacked. Senator, this is exactly what I'm talking about. This is what you do. This is what all of you do. You weaponize grief, you take tragedy and turn it into political theater. You don't care about September 11th. You don't care about those 2 people in Minneapolis. You care about using death to score points against a black Muslim woman who dares to speak truth in this building. She pointed at him. This hearing is not about my words. It is about intimidation, and the American people can see it. She was not entirely wrong. Politicians do weaponize grief, both sides. And the word intimidation landed hard in a room where Ilhan Omar was the only woman, the only Muslim, and the only person of color at the table. It landed and it sat there, and for about 30 seconds the room was not sure who was winning. She called it weaponizing grief. She called it intimidation. And from where she was sitting, with the cameras on her, and a 74-year-old white man from Louisiana reading her words back to her, I can understand why she felt that way. What Kennedy said next is why I am telling you this story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Kennedy did not fire back. He sat with the accusation the way a man sits with a cup of coffee he is not yet ready to drink. 10 seconds of silence in a hearing room. 10 seconds is a long time. Ma'am, you might be right about that. Maybe politicians do weaponize grief. I'll sit with that. I'll sit. I've probably done it myself without knowing. I'm from Louisiana, ma'am. We're not perfect either. He let that land, and what it did was something no one in the room expected. It took the weapon out of Omar's hands because you cannot fight a man who has just agreed with you. But I want to talk about something that isn't grief. Something that is just arithmetic. Because you use strong words about death. Some people murderer. You feel strongly about who lives and who dies, and whose fault it is. I understand that. I respect that. So let me ask you about a specific death. Not a policy death. Not a statistic. A man who was alive one evening and dead the next morning. And the words you chose for him. He did not say number 4. The numbers were over. This was a conversation now. September 10th, 2025. Charlie Kirk was shot and killed on the campus of Utah Valley University. He was 31 years old. He had a wife. He had 2 small children. Kennedy paused, not for effect, because the sentence needed room. 14 hours later, ma'am. 14 hours after he was shot through the neck on a college campus, you went on a podcast, and the things you said about him are things I am not going to repeat in this hearing room, because his family might be watching right now. He looked at her. 2 days after that, you went on X and you reposted a video. The video called Charlie Kirk, Dr. Frankenstein. It said, and I am quoting the video you shared with your 4 million followers, his monster shot him through the neck. He set the paper down flat on the table, both hands on it. Ma'am, his body was not yet in the ground when you posted that. Omar straightened. I was criticizing dangerous rhetoric, the kind of rhetoric that leads to political violence. I have been a target of that rhetoric my entire career. I have received death threats. I was physically attacked at my own town hall. I know what political violence looks like. I believe you, ma'am. The threats are real. I'm sorry about them. Long pause. But his wife was still at the hospital when you went on that podcast. His children were still at home. And 14 hours after their father was shot through the neck, you told the world he had it coming. Criticizing rhetoric is your right. You could have done it a week later, a month later, a year later. You could have said political violence is wrong, full stop, no matter who, no matter what they believe. But you didn't say that. 14 hours after a man was killed, you went on a podcast and said it was his fault. And 2 days later, you shared a video that called him Dr. Frankenstein and joked about how his monster shot him through the neck. Kennedy's voice got quieter, not louder. That is his trick. The more devastating the material, the softer he speaks. Ma'am, I am 74 years old. I have been in public life for a long time. I have said things I wish I could take back. Every honest person has. But I have never in my life looked at a man who was murdered and said he deserved it before his wife had left the hospital. You are a murderer. Those were your words for a president. For a man who was actually murdered, your words were he had it coming. 14 hours later. Here's what Kennedy never said out loud. He did not need to. The pattern was already visible, a map drawn in Omar's own ink. 3,000 dead. Some people did something. A murdered young father, Dr. Frankenstein, his monster shot him. 2 people killed in an ICE operation. You are a murderer. The words change. The volume changes. The outrage grows louder or softer, sharper or duller, depending on one thing and one thing only. Not how many people died, not how they died, not whether they had children or families or futures, only this. Which team were they on? $250 million. That is the number Kennedy said next, and it broke something. If you have been watching this and wondering how a person can call a president a murderer and mock a dead man in the same year and still sit in Congress, you are not alone. What comes next is the part that made me stop the footage and rewatch it twice. Leave a comment. Tell me if you knew about this before tonight. Kennedy picked up the paper again, but he did not read a quote because this one was different. This was not something Omar said. It was something she did not say. Ma'am, I want to talk about your district, Minneapolis. Your community, the people you said you care about, Feeding Our Future, a federal nutrition program that operated in your district. It was designed to feed low-income children during the pandemic, children who were going hungry. He paused. $250 million was stolen from that program. Not misspent, not misallocated. Stolen by a network of people who set up fake meal sites and billed the federal government for food that was never cooked, served to children who were never there. He paused. And you want to know the part that keeps me up at night? The state had 2 employees checking for fraud. 2 in the entire system. $250 million moving through a pipeline, and 2 people watching the gate. 1 number, 1 reaction. 60 people charged, most of them from your district, ma'am. The ringleader, Amy Bach, sentenced last month to 41 years in federal prison. She told investigators you knew about it. Your office says you didn't. I'm not going to ask you about that today. I'm going to ask you something simpler. You called the President of the United States a murderer on national television in front of every child in America who was watching. You used that word, murderer. $250 million was stolen from a program that puts food in front of hungry children in your district under your watch. 60 people charged. 41 years for the ringleader. What word did you use for them? Silence. Because I looked, ma'am. I went through your public statements, every press release, every tweet, every interview. I could not find one time you called anyone in that scandal a thief. Not once. Murderer for a president, and silence for the people who stole food from children. You said you care about your community. Those were your words 15 minutes ago. The community's children were going hungry, and $250 million was being stolen from the program meant to feed them, and you had no words for that at all. Kennedy did not wait for an answer because the trail was almost done. And one more thing, ma'am, because this is just math and I'd like to understand it. When you entered Congress in 2019, your financial disclosure showed modest assets, which makes sense. You were a community organizer. You worked in nonprofits. Your most recent disclosure shows your husband's company's valued at close to $10 million, a winery in California, a venture capital firm. The Department of Justice has opened an investigation into your finances and your campaign spending. I'm not going to ask you about the investigation. That's between you and the DOJ. But I will ask you this. $250 million was stolen from children's food in your district, and during that same period, your household went from community organizer money to a $10 million portfolio. You had a word for the president. You had a word for Charlie Kirk 14 hours after he died. You had a word for 3,000 Americans on September 11th. But for the people stealing from children in your own backyard, and for the money showing up in your own household, ma'am, you had no words at all. There was nothing left for me to say. Kennedy had said it all. Kennedy folded the piece of paper once, the same fold he had made when he took it out of his pocket 20 minutes earlier. He put it back inside his jacket. 5 quotes. 1 piece of paper. Done. He looked at Omar. Ma'am, I have been listening to you for 7 years. In hearings, on the news, on the floor of the House, at rallies and town halls and podcasts. And I want to tell you something that I mean with complete sincerity. You are one of the most talented speakers I have ever seen in government. And I have seen a lot of them. You have a gift for words. Real words. The kind that make people stand up. The kind that make people angry. The kind that make people feel like somebody finally said what they were thinking. But here is what I have noticed. You have used a lot of words about this country, ma'am. Murderer, racist, colonial, apartheid. Some people did something. You have used every word in the dictionary about America. He paused, and the room paused with him. 200 people breathing, and not one of them making a sound. Every word except 2. In 7 years, ma'am, in 7 years of sitting in the United States Congress, in a seat that this country made possible for you, a country that took you in when you were 12 years old, a refugee from Somalia with nothing. This country gave you safety. It gave you citizenship. It gave you an education. And it gave you a seat in the most powerful legislature on earth. And in 7 years, in all those words, you have never once stood at a microphone and said the 2 words that every parent in America teaches their child before they teach them anything else. Thank you. The room went still, not the polite silence of a hearing break, the silence of a room full of people who just heard something they had been waiting to hear for a very long time. Omar did not speak. She did not lean into the microphone. She did not reach for the identity shield. She did not call it racist. She did not call it Islamophobic. She did not call it a show trial or political theater or weaponized grief. She sat in her chair in the Russell Building, and for the first time that anyone in that room could remember, Ilhan Omar had nothing to say. Not because she had lost an argument, she has lost arguments before and kept talking, but because the 5 quotes on that piece of paper were hers. She said them, she posted them, she shouted them, and lined up one after another in the order that a 74-year-old man from Louisiana had put them in. They told a story she had never seen from the outside. Murderer for a president. Some people for 3,000. A joke about a dead man while his wife was at the hospital. Silence for the thieves who stole food from children. And not once in 7 years the 2 words that a 5-year-old knows. Kennedy gathered his notes quietly. I think we're done here, ma'am. I appreciate your time. Thank you. 2 words. Every child in America learns them before they learn to read. Every parent in America teaches them before they teach anything else. And in 7 years in Congress, the woman who had every reason in the world to say them never did. If that hits you the way it hit me, you know why this channel exists. Subscribe. And if you are grateful for this country, leave it in the comments. 2 words. My mother taught me 2 things before she taught me anything else. Say please and say thank you. It did not matter if it was a birthday present or a glass of water at a neighbor's house. It did not matter if you liked what you got. You say thank you because someone gave you something, and that means something. She did not learn it from a book. Her mother taught her, and her mother before that. It goes back further than anyone in my family can trace. Before the wars and the moves and the jobs that broke their backs, before everything else, there were those 2 words, please and thank you. They were the first things we learned and the last things we forgot. I think about that now because somewhere in America tonight, a mother is teaching her child to say thank you for a glass of milk. And somewhere in that same America, a woman who was given everything this country can give, safety, citizenship, education, a seat in Congress, is sitting in a hearing room having just been reminded that she never said it. Not once. That is not a political observation. It is a human one. There are millions of people in this country who came from somewhere else, who arrived with nothing, who learned the language and found the work and paid the taxes and raised the children and built the lives. And every single one of them at some point in their journey stood somewhere quiet. Maybe a kitchen, maybe a church, maybe just a sidewalk at dawn before the city woke up, and felt something they could not fully explain. A feeling that this place, for all its noise and mess and broken promises, had given them a chance that the place they came from never would. And they said thank you, not to a camera, not at a podium, just quietly to themselves, to the idea of a country that opens its doors. That is what makes this hard. Because the story of immigration to America is one of the most beautiful stories any country has ever told. People leaving everything, crossing oceans, learning new alphabets, starting from zero and building something. Not because America is perfect. It is not. But because it lets you try. It lets you fail and try again. It lets you run for office and win and sit in a room with 200 cameras and say whatever you want. It lets you call the president a murderer on national television and go home that night and sleep in your own bed. That is an extraordinary thing. It is an extraordinary country. And the woman who was given all of it, every single piece of it, used every word she had to tear it down, and never once used the two words a child knows. I do not know what Kennedy went home and thought about that night. He is a private man for a public person. He probably sat on his porch and saint. Tammany Parish and watched the sun go down the way he watches everything, slowly, patiently, without much fuss. But I know what the people watching at home thought about because I am one of them. And I thought about my mother and the glass of water and the two words that cost nothing to say and mean everything when you say them. There are people in this country who will never sit in Congress, who will never have a microphone or a camera or 4 million followers on the internet, who wake up every morning and go to work and pay their taxes and drive past the flag at the post office and feel something in their chest that they do not talk about because where they come from, you do not talk about feelings, but they feel it. Gratitude, not loud, not political, just real. And tonight, a 74-year-old senator from Louisiana unfolded a piece of paper with 5 quotes on it. And when it was over, the most powerful thing in the room was not a speech or a vote or a headline. It was 2 words that everyone knows and one person forgot. Thank you.